Hello, everyone. I'm Patrick Wheeler. I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Digital Strategies here at Tuck, and we are excited to welcome Stephanie Liu from Forrester Research with us today. Forrester, the relationship between Forrester and Tuck goes back for quite a long time. In fact, our first ever kind of speaker as part of the Brit Technology Impact Series was from Forrester, James McQuivey, who I know, Stephanie, I'm sure you've run across a few times in your time there. Forrester is a great resource for Tuck students. You have access to Forrester's research through your campus accounts with Tuck, and I highly recommend that you leverage them to get up to speed. We're particularly excited about the topic today, just because if you think about the digital transformation that's gone on over the last dozen or so years, marketing is perhaps the function within an organization that's transformed the most as a result of mobile technology's introduction. And so today we're gonna have a great conversation. I won't spoil anything from the presentation, but we're excited to have Stephanie here. She works with the marketing team, the marketing research team. She focuses on trust, privacy, understanding mobile technology and mobile marketing with B2C marketing professionals. She's just a really sharp mind on this stuff, and we're really excited to have her here today. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Steph, and let you kind of take away the show. Just housekeeping, if you're not speaking, please stay on mute. If you have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, raise your hand, and we'll do our best to kind of get folks up on the screen as quickly as possible and filter those questions. But thank you very much for joining us, and please, everyone, welcome Steph Liu.
Thanks, Patrick, and thanks for having me today. So as Patrick mentioned, today I'm going to run through how to balance privacy, trust, and mobile marketing. So first, just a quick lay of the land and how we got here. So at Forrester, we talk about data deprecation because it encompasses some of privacy regulations like GDPR, CCPA, but it also covers the operating systems and how they are taking action to give consumers more control over their privacy and really limit the kinds of data and the amount of data you can share with the company. So on the regulatory side, of course, we had GDPR, the first major privacy regulation to come out of the gate, and a pretty stringent one, right? It introduced the idea of opting in to data sharing instead of opting out. In the US, we've got the California Consumer Privacy Act, and on the ballot in November is the California Privacy Rights Act, which is basically trying to add some of the teeth back into CCPA that were lost when the bill was being negotiated. So that means adding back the right to private action, also known as class action lawsuits, and creating a new enforcement arm. Under CCPA today, enforcement falls entirely on the Attorney General, who has already publicly said he doesn't really have the resources to go after hundreds of CCPA complaints. I think he said his office could handle maybe 7 to 8 major investigations a year. So that's the regulation piece. Then we get into the operating system piece, and all of these screenshots, as you can probably tell, are from Apple because they launched their Privacy Matters. We'll call it an ad campaign, but it's really more like a corporate value. They launched that a few years ago now, and they really mean it, right? Back in the day, allowing an app to access your location was a simple yes, no, don't allow or allow, right? And if you look on the screenshot on the bottom right now, you've got much more granular options. You can allow an app to access your location once while you're using it or not at all. And with the new iOS, which just came out, you can share your exact location or your approximate location. So again, giving consumers much more choice over what location sharing means and what they're comfortable sharing with a particular app. Now, the screenshot in the middle is probably the one that's getting the most press right now, and it's the ability to prevent an app from tracking you across apps and websites. On the back end, what this means is an app cannot access what's called the ID for advertising. It's basically a semi-persistent device identifier. So you can identify person, device 1234 in this app is going to be the same as device 1234 in that app. And therefore we can start to understand, based on what apps you're using, what you're interested in and how to advertise to you, and how to re-advertise, remarket you. So if we serve you an ad in app A and you don't click on it, we'll try again in app B. The other piece of this is the browsers. So on a browser, there are cross-site cookies, which is basically, again, a semi-anonymous identifier that can track you across websites. Safari last year announced that they are blocking cross-site cookies by default. And they are, I think, the strictest in terms of not letting users opt out of this. This is, if you're using Safari, you're playing by Safari's rules, which means no cross-site cookies. Firefox actually was the first one to start doing this, but they were slower in making it a mandatory setting for all users. It used to be, you had to go into your Firefox settings, find the cross-site cookie settings, adjust them accordingly, etc. Safari basically made that decision for its customers. Microsoft Edge, I think it was earlier this year, they relaunched their browser, and you can see in their little landing page that loads when you go to Microsoft Edge's website, they put privacy front and center as part of their value proposition. And finally, Chrome, who are by far the biggest market. They own 2/3 of the browser market share across mobile and desktop. They announced that they're going to drop cross-site cookies, or by drop, I mean end support of cross-site cookies in May 2022. So that was really the nail in the coffin. And what this means basically is it's really hard for advertisers to now follow you across websites, right? They can't say, they can no longer register that you've looked at a pair of sneakers on Zappos.com and then use that Zappos information or that Zappos cookie to then remarket you with those sneakers on other websites. So data deprecation generally impacts the entire customer lifecycle. It affects everything from how much data you can collect on your customers and then how that impacts all of the downstream marketing activities. So that's things like understanding who your customers are and what they're interested in. It also changes the way you can build a segment, right? If I can't tell that you've been looking at sneakers on Zappos, then I can't pin you as a runner or a fitness enthusiast, right? I can't get that granular information about you anymore. That means it's harder to buy and optimize ads, right? I no longer understand what specifically you're interested in. At most, maybe I can see that you've been shopping for shoes, but there's a lot of leeway in that category, right? If you're a fitness, let's say you're a male shoe, you're looking for male running sneakers, a high heel ad is not gonna help you, right? Stereotypically, anyway. So that means, right, it's harder to make sure that your ads are reaching the right people, and it's harder to, again, to retarget you, to understand you looked at shoes on this website, so we're gonna show them to you on this website and that website and many more websites down the line. Overall, that means personalization is harder, right? I don't understand who you are as an individual. I don't understand the journey you've taken to get to this product. So it's going to be harder for me to figure out, okay, here's the kind of product or the kind of imagery or the kind of content that I think will drive you to click on my ad. It also impacts marketing measurement, which I think was one of the innocent bystanders that got swept into data deprecation. But basically, if I can't track you through a cookie ID or a device ID, I can't see your journey, right? I can't see that you clicked on this ad, you made this purchase, and then you came back and you made another purchase. So I can't determine that this campaign worked really well, or this campaign, the immediate purchase didn't look so good, but the average order value was a lot higher. So it actually worked out in that aspect. That understanding at a user level, right? At understanding you clicked on this ad and spent this much money, that piece is now broken. And finally, it also impacts vendor relationships. There are some companies who, to be frank, I don't know if they'll survive this new data deprecation landscape, because their business is built on the ability to track users across sites and across devices. I've talked to a number of vendors from the measurement space, from some advertising space, and there are basically two approaches. The first is to try and find a workaround, so a way to maintain the status quo of how we deliver advertising today with less data, or sort of these more existential questions of, is the way that we're advertising today okay? Maybe it's broken, maybe we actually need to start from scratch, but what does that look like? So far, this is all very marketing heavy, but I want to emphasize here that this doesn't just impact marketing, it will also impact other parts of the business. So for e-commerce, if you are a company like, let's say The Gap, you own Old Navy, Banana Republic, Athleta, and I think Hill City, if that's still a thing. It's no longer possible to track a user across all of your four brand websites if they haven't logged in. So if I'm looking at women's t-shirts on gap.com and then I switch to Old Navy, right? Old Navy can't tell what I was doing on Gap because it's a different domain. So if I land on Old Navy, like maybe they're gonna serve me with a huge landing page about kids clothing because they have no idea what I was doing on Gap's website. And all of that means the customer experience is going to be a little bit rougher. Again, that ability to personalize, that ability to try and drive relevance is going to be much harder. And again, the customer insights piece gets more complicated. And this is especially difficult for prospects. If you're trying to understand someone, a new customer, especially in B2B, right? The number of signals that you can pick up on who a buyer is, what kind of product they are interested in, if they're ultimately the person who has buying power, or if they're part of a decision team. Those kinds of signals that you could normally get from cross-site cookies no longer exist. And web analytics is also going to get harder. So understanding how people move through your website. Even though those tend to be first-party cookies, Safari said that they're going to delete those cookies every 7 days, which means your window of understanding which parts of your website are popular is now much shorter and much more compressed. And then lastly here, we've got fraud detection. So that means making sure you're a human, not a robot, and making sure you're not trying to hack your way into a system. Those tend to be based on third-party cookies. And A/B testing. So if I can't track your journey, right? I can't say that you saw this, you bought this product, and you returned and made additional purchases. If that thread is broken, then it's hard to declaratively say that variant A performed better at driving sales than variant B. So how did we get here? This all sounds pretty dire, right? Basically, marketers who have traditionally been accustomed to having all the data in the world are suddenly cut off at the knees. But what I like to remind marketers in this doom and gloom talk track is this didn't happen in a bubble. People like to accuse Google and Apple of being too paternalistic, right? We set the rules in our operating system and you have to abide by them. And while that's true to an extent, they're not just doing this on a whim. So if we look at Forrester's consumer technographics data, which surveys US online adults, we see things like 71% are aware that their information activities are collected by the sites and apps they use. So we know that our data is being tracked and that our activities are being tracked. And we don't like it. So 63% say it's not okay for companies to track activities across devices to send more relevant advertising. And the final piece of this is trust. Trust is really low right now. So 24% say they don't trust any companies to keep their information secure. This includes banks, healthcare companies, regulated industries. Social media companies is really low on the trust barometer. So all in all, I think consumers are more aware of the data ecosystem, of how much data companies are collecting on them, how much they're being tracked, and they're really uncomfortable with it. So as companies like Apple introduce more privacy controls, we see consumers taking advantage of them. When they updated that, that location prompt, right, from a simple yes, no to a reminder that, so let's say Google Maps has been using your location in the background. Do you want to continue letting them do this? The opt-in rate for sharing your location plummeted when they made that update. It used to be like the vast majority of consumers would just hit allow to sharing location, and now it's well under 50%. I think it's even down to a quarter, so about 25% will opt in. And of course that varies by the app and whether location sharing is necessary, but just across the board, opt-in rates have gone way down. And part of why we're fed up with being tracked, right, is I think we've all experienced what we call at Forrester creepy marketing experiences. And this tends to be the result of poor ethics and poor data hygiene. So we break it into 3 common scenarios. The first one is a perceived misuse of personal data. That's when you get marketing and your first reaction is, why do you know that about me? And we see this a lot with Facebook, right? When you get a Facebook ad that is too good and people immediately jump to the conclusion, Facebook must be eavesdropping on me, right? There's no other way they could know that about me. And that's really creepy, right? That shouldn't be the only logical explanation that Facebook has hacked your phone and has enabled your microphone at all times. But this is, unfortunately, right, because marketers have had so much data, we see this fairly often. The second creepy experience is a data hygiene error. So that's when you get things like direct mail that's addressed to a family member who's deceased, or the case of the Washington Post video editor who wrote an open letter 2 years ago now because she was pregnant and had hashtagged her pregnancy journey, like was very, shared a lot of it on social media and was obviously Googling, you know, pregnancy and product research, etc. And she got really fed up because she had a stillbirth and her hashtags changed and her Google searches changed, right? It went from product research to signs of miscarriage or into grief counseling. But the data brokers who were clearly able to identify that she was pregnant either didn't care or just didn't take the time to update her profile to say that she's no longer pregnant. Because the reality is pregnant women are a highly profitable marketing segment. And so she wrote this open letter because she was so frustrated by the onslaught of pregnancy ads that she continued to get, even though she thought she'd made it pretty clear through her searches, through her social posts, her hashtags, that she was no longer pregnant. And the final one is invasive or aggressive tactics. And this is when you see those ads that you just can't seem to get rid of, right? They follow you across the internet. And this is less harmful on an emotional level, but just really irritating, right? And this is where I think digital advertising, where it needs to be better, is there's no feedback cycle, right? There is no way to tell an ad on the open internet, I already bought your product, please stop showing it to me, or I'm not interested in this product, right? You can do that within Facebook, but if you're on the open internet browsing the Washington Post, for example, you can't tell an ad, I'm not interested, please go away. The good news though, is it is possible to be cool without being creepy. And it really boils down to 3 pillars: transparency, meaningful choice, and fair value exchange. So transparency really means being really clear and being human and explaining what data you're collecting and what you're doing with it. And when I say human, I mean not written by lawyers in legalese, but really using everyday language that a common consumer can understand. I'm a privacy researcher, so my benchmark is it's not a privacy policy that I should be able to understand. It's a privacy policy my mom should be able to understand. Like, she doesn't understand the nuances of cookies and device IDs, but she should be able to grasp at a basic level, here's the data that we're collecting on you and here's what we do with it. Meaningful choice means basically the Apple approach, right? Letting users decide what information they want to share and not breaking the customer experience if someone says they don't want to share a particular data point with you. There are a couple apps where if you don't share your location, right, the app basically bricks itself and can't function. And that's not really a meaningful choice, right? Your options there are really share your location or delete the app. It also means, again, introducing granular options instead of a nuclear opt-in or opt-out. And the final pillar is fair value exchange. So that means giving the customer something in return to acknowledge that they have made the choice to share information with you and they've exhibited some level of trust with your brand. In terms of what this looks like in the real world, I've got two examples. The first is Disney, and Disney does a really great job at this. So in the before times, Disney, if you went to a park, you could get what's called a magic band. It's basically a wearable RFID tag, and it can load your park passes, your hotel keys, I think even cash on there if you wanted to tap to pay at concession stands. But Disney is smart. It knows it's a family-oriented business and there are kids who are visiting the parks. So it wrote an FAQ that explains what Magic Bands is in perfectly plain English. It says, it introduces what an RFID tag is, what it isn't. It says it's not a GPS device. It is not tracking your location in real time. And how it works, like what kinds of information that that RFID tag is passing back and forth, because these are kids, right? Parents want to protect their children and themselves. So it was a very, very clearly written, very plain, but really clear explainer. In terms of meaningful choice, the Magic Band is completely optional. So if you're uncomfortable with the idea of a wearable, if you just don't want it collecting any data on your kids, then you don't have to use it. You can use paper tickets, you can use a physical hotel key, and your experience will be pretty similar. And fair value exchange means if you're opting into the Magic Band, you get a seamless experience. So the way that they phrase the benefit is it basically lets you move around seamlessly through the entire park and all the way from checking in and registering to checking out. So you don't have to fumble with tickets, make sure you haven't lost anything, etc. The flip side of that is a big box retailer who, I was reading their privacy policy the other day. It is just incredibly vague. There's a lot of mentions of data automatically collected. I have no idea what that means. And again, I'm someone who reads privacy policies pretty often as part of my job. So it's very vague. It doesn't explain what they're doing with my data. Doesn't say who they're sharing it with. So it's just sort of, we collect data on you, hard stop. In terms of meaningful choice, if you do want to opt out of some data collection, for example, their web analytics, they list the 4 web analytics vendors that they work with, and the onus is on you, the consumer, to reach out to these companies to say, I don't want my information tracked. Like, one of them is Google Analytics. Who do you even call at Google Analytics to explain that you want to opt out of data collection, right? It's not really a meaningful choice. And at one point it says, if you don't want to be tracked in the stores, your choice is to uninstall the app. And finally, for fair value exchange, because it's a retailer, the #1 benefit is coupons. And #2 is cross-device identity linking. And obviously I'm on the conservative end here because I'm a privacy researcher, but I don't think a coupon is a good value exchange for the unknown data that they're collecting on me and sharing with unknown parties, where they don't really give me a choice aside from doing business elsewhere. And cross-device identity linking, I understand the benefit as a marketer, right? You can target me across my You can target me on my desktop based on what I've been doing in the app, but again, don't really consider that a benefit as a consumer. So when we talk about benefit and value exchange, I always like to bring this slide along. It's called person-first personalization. And this is an idea that one of my colleagues wrote about a couple of years ago. And basically it's pushing marketers to move beyond superficial personalization. And by that, I mean the fill in the blank, you know, we've got your first name in our template, so we're good to go. It's personalized, we're done. One of my favorite examples of this is I get mail every quarter or so from a car insurance company, and they write Stephanie in giant block letters on the envelope. Stephanie, save on car insurance today. And I guess it's nice that they know my name, but I don't own a car. I don't need car insurance. So at that point, like no amount of personalization is going to save them. So instead of this fill in the blank approach, we push brands to think about these 4 kinds of outputs. And again, it all comes back to delivering value to the customer. So I have information to help you. I can simplify things for you. I think you might need this and I care about you. And again, it focuses back on how are we helping the customer. Personalization can't just be a matter of more messages or harassing you with that pair of shoes you looked at a month ago. It needs to be something more directly beneficial to the customer. And I think this lens is a good way of thinking about your outputs and how they actually benefit your end consumer. So, and if we take all of that and apply it to mobile marketing, here's where we are today. If this is my soapbox, mobile is not a channel. Anytime I talk to any company about mobile marketing, this is where I start. There's still so many cases where brands will ask me about mobile marketing as if it is a standalone channel that they can add on to an email program or another program. The reality is, if you think of your smartphone, it's aggregating channels, right? You've got your email in there, your SMS, your other messaging apps like WhatsApp, WeChat, iMessage, whatever. You've got your social channels and the push notifications from your apps. So as soon as you start to think of mobile as a single channel, you run the very real risk of creating these crappy customer experiences. Like nobody wants to hear from FICO 3 times in 10 minutes, but that's what's happening because they're duplicating their SMS and their email alerts. Ditto with the New York Times, right? They literally took their push notification, copied it, pasted it as an email, and sent both. But they should be able to tell, I've logged into the New York Times app. You've got my email, obviously, because I subscribe to your newsletter. They should be able to see that I am subscribing to both, but I don't need alerts twice. And today, because of the pandemic, I'm getting more questions from brands who are newer to mobile marketing. It's something that they are picking up for the first time, and I understand the logic, right? We are all home, we're traveling less, our phone is literally within an arm's reach at all times. So hey, our customers are super reachable, right? No one's really moving around that much. People definitely aren't coming into stores as much. So therefore, we should blast them with mobile messages. And what I always caution here is mobile is a highly interruptive format, right? Like because our phones are always with us, that means it's actually a highly interruptive messaging format. So you need to think about whether a notification is actually appropriate. Is it worth interrupting your customers throughout the day? Hopefully not throughout, but during the day for your message. Is it actually urgent? So this is from my colleague, Julia Osk, who built this really great 2x2 that basically says a notification needs to be simple and it needs to be immediate. So by simple, that means the content is clear, but the call to action is also clear and it doesn't take too many steps to complete. If I have to authenticate to complete the call to action and there's 15 additional steps, that's far too complicated for a mobile notification. And if it's not immediate, right? If it's not giving me peace of mind, if it's not urgent, then please don't send me a notification because then you're just annoying me at this point, right? So she created this graphic, which is a mock-up of an airline industry. And of course, anything to do with where you need to be in the airport and at what time, those are all urgent, right? If your flight's delayed, if your gate is changing, things like that, perfect notification. Other things like getting a discount on a rental car if you book through the airline. First of all, that takes a lot of steps to do. And second of all, it's really not urgent, right? So that would be better off as an email. Now, of course, things can change over time. If you've got loyalty points that are expiring, right? Maybe you start that as an email, and then as the expiration date comes closer, you switch into a notification. And that's fine, but I think there are too many brands right now who are thinking, oh, we basically want to take our email program and replicate it into mobile because everyone's on their phones all the time. And emails, you know, there's a stereotype, emails are just spam inboxes now, but people will pay attention to notifications, which is technically true. But again, because it's so interruptive, it comes with some risks. You need to think about if interrupting your customers is necessary and if the message warrants that interruption. Moving forward, hopefully when we get out of this pandemic and we can all go outside again, we're talking about what we call moments-based marketing. So a moment is the point when a person interacts with a brand to get what he or she wants immediately and in context. And we break moments down into 5 dimensions: channel, context, construction, content, and consumer. And what this basically means is we're seeing an evolution, or I hope to see an evolution, away from what I call marketer dictated messaging. So that's, I've decided to send you this message at this time on this device, and everyone gets the same thing. Maybe we punch in your name and say it's personalized. But moving away from that into messaging that's much more responsive. Based on this insight we've picked up, we're going to send you this message that is tailored to your needs at that moment. So the classic example I use is Starbucks. If I've got the Starbucks app and I'm sharing my location, it can see that I'm about to walk by a location, and it can remind me, hey, you've got a free latte waiting, pop on in to redeem your reward. And that's great, right? I can go get my coffee. It's reacting to my location at that time, right? It's reacting to my loyalty status and delivering me a message that can help me. But that all has to happen pretty quickly, right? My location data has to sync to my CRM data, which has to pull in my loyalty data. If there's a lag in that process, then I've either walked too far and I'm not turning around to get my free latte, or even worse, actually paid for my latte because I forgot I had a free reward waiting for me. So in terms of what this looks like today, it's still early days, but we're starting to see this. So United Airlines is pretty good when your flight's delayed. So if you're a loyalty, a Mileage Plus member, what United will do is take everything it knows about you from your past travel behaviors and use that to try and rebook you on a flight that you'll like. So in this example, this flight is delayed considerably, and now it's going to land at 2 in the morning, which is probably too late for most people. So, it gives you the option to view other flights, and it will say, we've seen that you have had layovers in Houston before, so maybe that's a preferred airport for you. And it will know if you prefer a window, middle, or aisle seat because you've either volunteered that in a preference center or just through your booking history. But it knows, right? People's needs, especially for travel, will change depending on whether it's a family trip or a business trip. So none of this is binding, right? You can still look at other flights. You can still pick a different flight aside from the one that United is recommending to you. But an important aspect of all of this is you need customers to be able to be willing to share you need your customers to be willing to share data with you, right? So these are all examples of the different pop-ups that appear to get you to opt into notifications. And the baseline, which is what Marriott formerly Marriott Rewards, was doing is the boilerplate Apple language. So they didn't change a single thing in the template. Bleacher Reports sends out 2 requests for notifications, which is confusing. The second one has a little bit more detail, right? You'll get notifications for the teams and sports you choose as soon as their breaking news happens. But to get better, I think there are too many apps today who are settling for these standard iOS templates. But Chick-fil-A actually does a really good job. They explain in the app before you get that iOS prompt, they explain in the app what kinds of notifications they send. And if you hit yes, sounds good, then you get the pop-up where you hit allow. So that's a really good workaround for working within the bounds of Apple's limitations on how much you can change that boilerplate language. And then finally is Caviar, who says pretty clearly, we use push notifications to send you timely updates on your order, and you can hit enable or skip for now right then and there. But the point here is you need to make the value proposition clear to the customer, right? We want to send you notifications. If you're Marriott, like, what are you notifying me about? I don't need an up-to-the-minute update on my status, right? It's really not urgent. It only matters when I'm going to book a hotel. And if customers trust you, they will actually give you a lot of data. So Stitch Fix is one of my favorite examples here because if you've ever signed up for Stitch Fix, it is an incredibly lengthy process. My colleague, Brendan Witcher, went through this and said it was basically like filling out a dating profile because it does get that granular. And you can see they're asking you on five different axes: your size, your fit and cut, your style, your price, and more about you, which is basically lifestyle questions. It's a lot, and it gets into how much are you comfortable spending for these specific kinds of items, right? But you, the consumer, know exactly why Stitch Fix is asking this and what the benefit is for you, right? The whole idea is the more you tell Stitch Fix, the more likely you are to get clothing that you like in your monthly box. So there's incentive there to tell Stitch Fix more about yourself. I read this really great quote from one of the data scientists at Stitch Fix. It was in Fortune. And she said, the data we have is a gold mine, right? It helps us understand preferences and style trends and stay ahead of the curve. So we can see if something like crop tops are actually popular or if that's just something that only lives on the runway. But she also said that Stitch Fix is a really trusted brand and that Stitch Fix knows about clients' pregnancies before their families do, because they start poking around for maternity clothing pretty early on and are willing to share that with Stitch Fix, again, because Stitch Fix is delivering value for all of the data that it's gathering. And finally, when in doubt, ask the customer. This is a relatively new aspect of marketing that I'm seeing gain more traction, especially since all of the data deprecation aspects came into play. But the general idea is, instead of trying to infer or guess what your customer is interested in, just ask them point blank. So this example is from Mecca, which is an Australian beauty retailer. And they built this little quiz centered around Mother's Day. So the idea is we can give you a gift recommendation if you tell us a little bit about yourself and your budget, what you're looking for, etc. But what I love about it is the second question: what kind of beauty shopper are you? And your options range from, I know next to nothing about beauty, please help me, to I love beauty, but I'm usually buying for myself. With this question alone, Mecca can segment you and totally change your customer onboarding experience. So if you say that you know next to nothing about beauty and you just need help, it can tag you, right? You're not a beauty enthusiast. You just need that annual reminder that Mother's Day is coming up and it's time to pop into Mecca to buy a gift, right? If you say that you love beauty and you're usually shopping for yourself, then you get tagged as a beauty guru, and you'll be getting those alerts about new product launches or in-store events, or I guess virtual try-ons right now. But it's very clever because this is not data that you can infer, right? It's not data you can buy or assume or guess about someone. So why not just ask them basically, what kind of help do you want from us, and how do you want us to communicate with you? And that is the end of my little spiel. I saw some questions coming in.
Yeah, Joe, do you want to kind of handle some of those questions popping up in the chat?
Absolutely.
I mean, I could ask questions all day if you.
Well, yeah, so just as a reminder for everybody, feel free to use the chat or the hand raise feature. We will kind of go back and forth between both. But yeah, first of all, thank you, Steph. That was really, really informative. Yeah, we did have couple quick questions. So first was from T21 and CDS fellow Sarthak Vaish. He just wanted to confirm that Chrome said they will continue to track consumers across websites through 2022.
It's not that Chrome is tracking you across websites, but they will let other websites track you across websites, yes.
Okay.
So yes, they've announced 2022 to give advertisers time to react. And you have to remember, Google's in a unique position here because they have a huge advertising business, which is a problem Apple and Firefox don't have to grapple with. So they can't take any drastic measures that make it seem like they're trying to benefit their own ad business.
So in follow-up to that, does that include things like the Facebook tracking pixels, and how much does that play in if I'm a website and I've installed a tracking pixel to be able to link back to Facebook ads and other things, others, does that include that kind of tracking?
Yeah, I'd say it's a gray area right now. Pixels and cookies are different underlying mechanisms. So Google's announcement most likely will not impact the Facebook tracking pixel, but the browsers are starting to build that in now. So I use Brave, which is a privacy-based browser, and you have the ability in settings to block Facebook embeds, which includes those pixels. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if Google eventually builds out something similar.
All right, thank you. Okay, then we had another question from Emma Sapat, also another T21, excuse me, and CDS fellow. Emma asked, for companies that use several digital distribution channels, she would think that this also makes attributing marketing value, those who are actually influencing the customer to buy the sneakers, really challenging.
Yes, and that's why I say I think marketing measurement was sort of an innocent bystander here, but yes, it's going to be a lot harder to understand which path is the most valuable, what kind of customer is the most valuable. So instead, what you're going to get now, or what marketers are receiving, is data in aggregate. And internally at Forrester, we've been discussing maybe you don't need a personal identifier to track measurement. Yes, there's obviously benefit to understanding which journey or which kind of path was the most profitable, but whether you need to be able to re-identify that to an individual consumer, that's been the status quo. I don't think it's really necessary though. So now what you're getting is an aggregate, you need 10 clicks or more, and they will say basically the average order value based on this campaign was X dollars. So much, much less granular. I think will make optimizing campaigns much harder because you can't tell specifically what was working about campaign A versus campaign B.
How much does this change the business models around the ad-based business model? We've seen in Silicon Valley the rise of ad-based business models when there are other options available because they've been very, very profitable for a lot of companies. Do you see that change of business models within the technology sector?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm definitely seeing more diversification, and we're seeing this with publishers, right? Publishers I think they tolerate Google. They don't necessarily like working with Google, right? I think it's become pretty clear that Google News is actually actively hitting their revenue. But Google's also so big that they can't be ignored. So what we're seeing with publishers is they're starting to collect first-party data because they want to build up their own understanding of their audience and sell that directly to advertisers to essentially not necessarily cut out Google as a middleman, because I think that's too hard, but to offer ways of working directly with advertisers. So minimizing or reducing their reliance on Google. Unfortunately for consumers, that means we're going to see a lot more, not paywalls, but login walls. So give us your email address to finish reading this article, or and I saw you just roll your eyes there. It's going to be a terrible experience. Like I'm already seeing it now. The New Yorker just cut their free articles down to 0. So now it's please sign up or subscribe to continue reading. And it sucks from a user experience perspective. But for the publisher angle, right, they need this data. They need to understand who's reading their stuff so they can sell that to advertisers. And again, not have to rely on Google as much.
Steph, how does all this play out with the role of influencers? Do they become more important or less important in this new world?
I hate influencers, so personally, I hope less important. It's a good question. I think it's going to become harder to measure, right? You can see that how many people have clicked on an influencer link. You're not going to be able to track that to who actually made a purchase and who made a purchase that that was profitable versus signing up for a free trial, for example. So it's hard to say. I think there's some, like the beauty industry, who have really leaned in on influencers and are going to have a hard time cutting it off. But in terms of measuring the efficacy of influencer programs, that definitely got harder with data deprecation.
You could see one thing that we return to more of the old style sort of broadcast type advertising if you can't rely on sort of identification. So that's the old, influencer is just another version of the old spokesperson, right? And so,
yeah.
So it will see if it's a return to old school marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're starting to see that, right? Even the hip DTC companies have gone into traditional TV advertising and direct mail. My colleague Jim Nail, who's been around since the direct mail days, he used to collect all of the DTC flyers and he would put them up next to my desk and say, "See, everything old is new again."
That's great. We have a hand up from Kira. Kira, go. Feel free to unmute yourself, please, and go ahead and ask your question.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Hi, Steph. Nice to meet you, and thank you so much for talking to us. This was really interesting for me because I was actually a cybersecurity consultant before coming to Tuck. So I've thought about this sort of data privacy issue a lot from like an information security perspective, but less from a marketing perspective. And specifically, I know you mentioned GDPR at the beginning, and I've thought a lot about the fact that like data privacy in the US isn't governed by acts across the entire US. They're mostly governed by state or by industry. And so basically I'm wondering, and you kind of answered this with Patrick's question, but do you see any trends of either companies moving states or changing industries in order to continue some of these marketing schemes that you've mentioned?
That's a good question. I'm going to say no, because if we look at the way CCPA operates or the way Illinois' biometrics law operates, it's not applying to businesses based in those states. It's applying to any business who markets to customers in those states. So it's not a matter of moving your headquarters. With GDPR, right, there's some limitations around data flows, right? So it makes sense to move your company either into the EU or out of the EU if you don't want to get involved. But that kind of flexibility doesn't exist with the way the state's privacy laws are written. And it's too hard, realistically, to say we're going to remove all Californians from our database. A, that's hard to do logistically, and B, that's a lot of lost revenue, especially when you look at the population size there. And then in terms of pivoting industries, I think that would be a short-sighted solution because obviously the regulated industries have more limitations, but I have a state tracker actually of all the different privacy laws that are popping up that are either in discussion and negotiation or are close to being ratified. And I think CCPA was really, it's the start of a trend. It's not the end of the trend.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And Steph, we have another question from Kathleen Coyle. She's asking, why does it seem that there was or has been less uproar over the credit card companies sharing and selling transaction data? I'm assuming then, the larger internet companies is the other side of that.
Ooh. I honestly don't know. If I had to speculate, it's because I think there's still people who don't quite understand how that works. And second, there are just more immediate pressing issues at hand. Like the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal, while it was a real disaster, I think it honestly was very helpful in terms of educating customers on the data economy, on how Facebook is using your likes and your friends, how many other people that you've never heard of can access that data and manipulate it for ways that you would never expect, right? As an innocent Facebook user. So I think it's taking more precedence. I mean, there was the Apple Card, right, which was, again, built on privacy, like all things Apple does these days. But they got so much pushback after, I'm trying to remember, there was like news that men were getting higher credit limits than women, and Goldman Sachs was backing it. Like there was a lot of controversy there. So I think it was well intentioned, but again, it comes back to, there were so many bad privacy headlines and so many things to worry about. How do we prioritize that? And realistically, I think, especially today when we're going contactless and credit cards really are the way to go, that's just falling lower on the priority list.
Thanks. I know we've got a couple more questions, so I just want to be respectful of everybody's time, but Rebecca, go ahead and you've got the floor, please.
Thank you. I was wondering, what do you sort of foresee or predict for the future of ad targeting and retargeting as a field? Like, do you think that the field is going to sort of die and fizzle out the way SEO did, or what do you kind of predict?
Don't quote me on this, but I think ad targeting will survive. It will just be a lot broader. So we can't target to an individual anymore, but I also don't think that's a bad thing. Like, I'm not convinced that retargeting actually works. Like, harassing me with a pair of shoes irritates me more than it drives me to actually consider purchasing those shoes. I saw a really good joke on Twitter. It was like, yes, I just bought a $50,000 car based on a promoted tweet. Thank you, Twitter. Instead, I think we'll get to much broader, like almost the way that we target TV, right? We know the audience viewership of who watches This Is Us, for example, right? Tend to be younger. So let's target that audience based on what NBC can tell us about that viewership base. So it's much more audience based. It's going to be like age demographics, much broader. But I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Again, part of how we got here is from over targeting, right? Facebook getting too good and making us think that they're eavesdropping on us. Or pharmaceutical companies. Like, I always thought pharma targeting is really dicey, right? You're getting into HIPAA concerns and like very personal information very quickly. So maybe that's not something where you need to go individual, and broad-based marketing is okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I think we've got probably time for maybe one, maybe two more questions. We'll see how the questions roll and what the responses are. But one question from Chuck Sherman asks, what strategies would you recommend to internet citizens to avoid online marketing and to maintain some semblance of privacy?
Too many things. First, clear your cookies regularly. Second, block third-party cookies in your browser. You can do that today. Third, download a privacy extension. Like, I use Privacy Badger. There's also Disconnect. There's also Ghostery, but Ghostery is owned by a data broker, so that's a little dicey.
All very good tips. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, does this, one of the things that's really interesting when we talk about Apple, having iOS, obviously Apple's business model is dramatically different than Google, but Google with Android and then you look at the large ISPs and sort of their power. Does this concentrate more data power into those large players because they have other ways of understanding as opposed to just tracking you across the web? Like, does the OS level become the default kind of data tracking level for mobile?
Yeah, so in marketing, we call those walled gardens. They're the ecosystems who intentionally make it hard to get data out because it forces you to work directly with them. So that's Facebook, Google, Amazon, even Walmart now. And yes, I think it does unfortunately reinforce their power because they have so much data on you. And we're seeing this on the publisher side as well. Right, it's really easy to say, please log in so you can keep reading this article. If you're someone like the New York Times or the Washington Post or CNN, right, someone who's reputable, well-known. If you're on like, I don't know, Thought Catalog or Upworthy, right, like one of those more viral-based websites, it's going to be a lot harder to say that creating an account is worth it, just so you can get through that one clickbait headline and get on with your day.
And then let's do one more question. Another one from Emma. She says, do you think the rising use of machine learning and algorithms in marketing ties into the increasing anxiety about privacy and data collection by players like Facebook?
I don't know, actually. I don't know if the common consumer thinks about how machine learning works and what Facebook is cranking out with their data. Ultimately, again, thinking not of my expectations, but my mom's expectations, I think it's the targeting that really creeps her out more than understanding the ins and outs of what Facebook is calculating based on her data.
Steph, do you see this world?
Question, but I think it's more of an academic one than a consumer one.
Do you see the world kind of bifurcating? I think Apple's been, as you rightly, I think as you've said, we tend to agree that has a competitive advantage and is leveraging that from a privacy perspective and building its ecosystem to be much more privacy centric. Whereas, because of their underlying ad-based business model, Google, Android, I just don't ever see kind of going in that direction. And you're starting to see companies kind of move in one direction or the other. Their business model is much more data centric, or it's not. Or if it's data centric, it's very much within their own business and not third party kind of data centricity. Do you see that continuing to kind of divide and move these two kind of ways of viewing the world dividing further apart? Or do you see more folks moving in the privacy direction over time?
You mean relying on first party data versus third party data?
Yeah, first party data, additional business models that are less data centric, whether that's, membership models or just simply, as we, for example, when we look at Netflix as an entity, they have largely moved further and further away from their targeting of their algorithm. Is actually, they found it can be less precise over time, that they don't have to continue to become precise. And so they can essentially collect, if they want, less data. And because they are not an ad supported business, it's monetized via, a subscription model. Like, there's less in it for them to continue to grow their data footprint. And so I actually see them probably over time, if anything, retreating and making an argument that that's part of what they do. Whether that's exactly what they will do or how they do it today is unknown, but there's that kind of view of the world. And then there's the Facebook view, which is, this is about making a lot of money, and advertising is incredibly lucrative. And we will continually push against some of the things that companies like Apple's doing. I think Mark Zuckerberg had stated that, if the rules for iOS 14 had already been implemented, that they pushed till next year, it could cut 50% of their revenue from their ad business. That kind of, like, there seems to be two different camps right now growing in different directions, and that gap seems to be widening.
Yeah, I would say the haves here are the ones who have that rich owned data, right? Like Netflix may not need it for advertising, but their recommendation engine is still one of the sweet spots, right? If you can't find something you like on Netflix, you're not going to keep paying for it. And this is where Spotify is, I think, really, really good at this, right? They don't need to know everything about me for the purpose of serving ads. The ads I get on Spotify are pretty broad, pretty general, but it's the recommendation engine of what I should be listening to next that keeps me a loyal Spotify user. The have-nots in this case are the ones who, yes, are relying on third parties to feed them information about who's visiting them. So this is, to go back to my other example, this is like the Upworthies of the world, right? They were relying on Facebook to drive traffic to their website and to tell them who was clicking on Upworthies links within Facebook. Without that, right, I think they're not going to have a very good time. I mean, they already had a terrible time when Facebook tweaked its newsfeed algorithm, but also in terms of getting audience insights and understanding, you know, what ads they should be showing, who they should be partnering with. Those insights, they're going to have to either create a paywall, like create some value for forcing you to log in, but without it, they're pretty much in the dark. And I'm calling them out specifically, but this is true for really a lot of publishers, a lot of websites that aren't widely known, don't have good reputations, or just have really small audiences.
Yeah, I think we're just about out of time, but you know, from me here at the center and all of my colleagues, all of our students and alumni that are able to join, I just want to thank you so much for this enlightening conversation. It's, I think, a topic that's not going away, and to help educate everyone on where this is headed has been an incredibly valuable last hour of our time for sure. So thank you so much for that. Yeah,
thank you for having me.
Stephanie, this has been great. I've been taking notes the whole time, and we really appreciate you making the time. It's a bold new world.
That it is.
Wonderful. Thank you again, and give our best to all the folks down there at Forrester when you're on your next kind of Zoom call.
Will do. Take care, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.